Welcome to the online Women's Basketball Summit. Today, my good friend Beth Mayer is kicking off the summit, and we will be discussing eating disorders in female athletes. Beth has been working in the eating disorder field for 34 years. Beth, welcome to the call.
Hi, Jen.
It's nice to see you.
Nice to be here, too.
All right, Beth, so you've been doing this a long time. So let's go into your background, how you got started working with female athletes with eating disorders. Just learn about you.
So, I started in the field in 1983, really before eating disorders were almost diagnosed. And at that point, we didn't know a lot. We've been learning a tremendous amount about eating disorders, and particularly, the past 10 or 15 years with athletes.
Nice. So what is your current position now? I know you work for Meta and then you have your private practice. So let's touch on what you do with Meta. What is Meta?
So at Meta, I'm the executive director, and I oversee, it's a nonprofit. It's a wonderful nonprofit where we do intakes and assessments, lots of coaching, not coaching like you do, Jen, but coaching to help people understand eating disorders more, loved ones. And we try to get people into the treatment they need. And we see a lot of female athletes at Meta.
Okay, and then you have a private practice. And what do you specialize in? Who do you see in your private practice, and how long you've been doing that?
So I've been in my private practice. It's funny, I feel very old when I do these recordings. I've been in my private practice since 1987, way before many of you watching this were born. And I have always worked primarily with females, sometimes with men. I see a ton of athletes. I see a lot of actually people who hope to become professional athletes and actually get injuries.
Okay, so currently in your practice now, you're seeing a bunch of athletes or athletes that are injured. So why are they coming to see you? Obviously, there's some sort of disordered eating, but what is the main reason they're seeking out your help?
Either they're coming because they've lost a significant amount of weight. They might have another type of eating disorder called bulimia nervosa or binge eating disorder. A lot of times what happens with when somebody is diagnosed with an eating disorder is they start off trying to be healthier, and a lot of athletes are doing that, and then it turns into either disordered eating or an eating disorder.
Can you kind of like define what disordered eating is as best you can, and then kind of like break down a couple of the eating disorders and define them and what you see as common with female athletes?
Absolutely. I think that there are many people in this world actually that have pretty disordered eating. And it's hard to define now because so many people, as you know, are doing cleanses and are, eating what they call clean. And, it's up to, when I say somebody has disordered eating, it's how they feel about it. How much are they thinking about food in their body every day? And I'm sorry to say that many people now spend a lot of their day either trying to lose weight, trying to live in a body that's really unreasonable for them. So that's disordered. It turns into an eating disorder. Again, there's certain diagnostic criteria, but when I'm evaluating whether somebody needs clinical treatment, it's really how not only the medical piece, which is, anorexia nervosa when you've lost a certain amount of weight, but also how much time and energy they're putting into thinking about food and eating. And then there are a lot of medical issues that go along with eating disorders that a lot of athletes are seeing.
Got it. So let's touch on a little bit. Do you see female athletes that when you see them have body confidence or like body image issues?
I would say I see very few people who have body confidence. I'd like to see more.
Lack of body confidence is what
I see very many people who have a very disordered relationship with their body. I think many female athletes think they're supposed to live in a certain body, and they don't look at the usefulness of their body. So a lot of swimmers who are supposed to be really muscular, or soccer players, feel like, I'm too big. Or, many ballet dancers, there's particularly eating disorders comes into the life of an athlete when there is weight being looked at in their field.
Okay, so I guess leading into what you just said, when weight is being looked at in their field, obviously, preseason basketball is kind of in full swing right now. And I'm sure some of the girls during the summer didn't do their workouts, possibly gained some weight. So advice you're going to give to coaches, strength coaches out there, that obviously these athletes aren't performing the way they think they should be performing on the field, on the basketball court. What's the advice you would give the coaches, what to say to these athletes to promote like a healthy eating, and what not to say that could trigger an eating disorder?
Well, the one thing is, so remember, particularly this summer is a critical time when the girls come back, and they may have lost weight, they may have gained weight, they may have gotten much taller. And I think the idea for coaches is actually not to say anything about their body, really talk and emphasize the strength. So if a female athlete comes to a coach and says, I haven't worked out all summer and I've gained a lot of weight, the response from the coach would be, okay, what we're going to do is work on getting you stronger again, not having you lose weight, or we'll, talk about their eating and what they should be cutting out. I think that the way when you build body confidence in an athlete, it's really talking about the purpose of their body. What can their body do versus what does their body look like?
Gotcha. All right, to play devil's advocate, because these coaches are getting paid to win games.
Yeah.
And if their athletes are not performing because, their bodies are not, they're not fueling the bodies the way they're supposed to, it needs to be addressed on some level. How do they address it? Or should they be discussing nutrition, or should there be nutritionists working with these athletes?
I think that having a nutritionist work with an athlete is absolutely fine. And I think it actually could be helpful if they're talking, I love your language with fueling the body. I think that that's what we want to do, is really look towards what foods are going to help you become a better athlete. But I think that what people talk about is you shouldn't eat this or you should eat that. And really, athletes can eat probably a lot of what they want. And most people that aren't eating what they really crave and desire end up binging and then feeling horrible and actually not performing as well.
Okay. So you and I have talked about this a lot, because I see you on a daily basis. Good and bad foods. You hear it thrown around, obviously, with every population there is, but let's just kind of touch on that with the female athletes out there and fueling their body. Are there good foods? Are there bad foods? I'd love to have your input and your advice on that.
There are foods that help your body sustain itself. So protein, fats. But I would never say there's a good or bad food. When you and I go out to eat, we eat whatever we want, right? And that might not be the best thing for our exercise habits, but it's the best thing for our brain and for our, love of food. I think that you want to really help your athletes find a balance. Remember that if you are not helping your athlete figure out what they really want to eat, then they probably will not be happy and content, or they'll end up having disordered eating where they're not really enjoying their food and they can't figure out what they want.
I think it's important at an early age, through middle school, high school, college, and beyond, that females in general have a positive relationship with food. And again, it's all about fueling your body. You need to find out what works for you, what doesn't, when you're trying to perform on the basketball court. Yeah, there's going to be certain foods that you're going to feel better, you're going to play better, and you need to figure that out. But can you touch a little bit on kind of just how you work with the females developing a positive relationship with food?
So I really, it's funny, in life, I think we really want to figure out what do we really want, right? And it's no different than how you build a relationship with food. What happens with a lot of people is they have all of these foods that they don't really want, and then they crave other foods. So really, I think that kind of in the eating disorder world, it's really about finding your balance and feeling like I can have these foods and I deserve. A lot of girls feel like they don't deserve to eat certain foods, or they're bad. And that's a horrible thing to say about how you feel about yourself when you eat a food, that I'm a bad person because I ate that. So what we do is we legitimize all food. We say, what do you really, really want? And if you're fueling your body in the way it needs to be, and I mean, you don't wake up and have Twinkies for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because then your body's not going to know what it wants. If you're really fueling your body, you can eat all kinds of food.
That sounds great. I think, and everyone hears this at any age, like everything in moderation.
Right.
I think, and we know this even as adults, if we're craving a food and we put it off and we put it off and we put it off, finally when we eat it, it's out of control what we do eat.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. So injuries in female athletes, especially ACL injuries, are out of control right now. I know you see injuries with the athletes you see. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about when athletes are getting injured, why sometimes it can develop into an eating disorder.
So here's what I've seen particularly in my private practice, because at Meta we see people pretty short term, and my practice I see people longer term. I think that when you work with a female athlete, they really identify with their status as an athlete. And when you get an injury, first of all, you suddenly are not active, and so you don't know really what to do with yourself. So a lot of people turn to food to numb themselves because they're bored, but also it speaks to a little bit of your identity. And so a lot of times I have girls that say, if I'm not a basketball player, who am I? Like, this is what I wanted to do for my career, and now I'm injured and I feel like my self-esteem has gone down. So I think the work we have to do with our female athletes is not just orient them towards being the best athlete, which I think is wonderful, but being a good person, having a diverse life, not just, you can't just identify as only an athlete, because if you lose that for short periods of time, you feel like you're left with nothing.
So what tips and techniques do you use with your female athletes to help them identify other than a female athlete?
So one of the things I do is I really talk to them. Sometimes I go back to before they became an athlete. What did they enjoy? I worked with this wonderful athlete who was actually going to college as kind of a star athlete, and she got injured, and we went back to her experience in third grade, and she was like, I loved acting when I was in third grade. We said, well, maybe you should try that for a while. And she really ended up loving acting and being an athlete. So you really want to help them discover some of their skills, some of the things they may have loved and maybe have left because of being an athlete takes so much of your time and energy.
I think it's important that these female athletes identify other than a female athlete, because most of them, if they go into college as an athlete, once college is over, they're done being an athlete, right, and they're going to need to transition into the real world. And you and I also know from high school playing into college, there's still a very small percentage of female athletes that actually are going to go from high school to college. So I think it's important that these female athletes, again, as you've talked about, identify other than an athlete, find other things they enjoy other than playing basketball and playing other sports, so they have an easier time transitioning into the real world once they're outside the real world.
Right. And I think that one of the things I really emphasize with my girls is, what else do you think you're good at? And a lot of times it's not, I try not to emphasize school, like I'm a straight A student. It's like, are you a good friend? Do you enjoy being a teammate? These are the type of things that will last for a lifetime. I'm sorry to say that oftentimes being an athlete does not last a lifetime.
No, absolutely not. And everyone listening, you'll hear as the interviews go along, because Beth is the first interview that's going live, that some of the basketball coaches, some of the strength coaches have touched upon. They recruit good people before they'd ever recruit a good athlete. So right. I think, again, you're going to hear that throughout the call, that we're looking for good people. And again, they need to identify other than being an athlete. So shifting gears a little bit, I know we talked about this. I would love to touch upon a little bit with the female athlete triad, what it is and your expert advice on the topic.
So the female athlete triad, it's all about kind of the loss of your menstrual cycle. It's when you are so athletic and driven that your medical condition starts failing. And that actually happens with a lot of athletes. And I think a lot of doctors are like, oh, that's fine. You're losing your period. You could get osteoporosis. This is not okay. And so I think that in our society, we've almost gotten comfortable with it. And so athletes in general should not have any medical deterioration. And that's really, really important. So it's weight loss, it's absence of periods, it's just overall fatigue. You get stress factors, people that start restricting their food intake, all of those things end up being the female athlete triad.
So just to be clear, just so I'm on the same page with you and everyone else listening, the female athlete triad is weight loss.
Yeah.
Loss of period. Yeah. And then osteopenia, right?
Osteoporosis or osteopenia.
So those are the three.
Right, but you can have one, you don't have to have all three. I think that one of the things we're trying to do is say, even a loss of a period, you want to start looking at that. I actually have worked with a lot of athletes, and I know this is a little scary to hear, but that have stayed athletes as young adults. And if your weight is too low and you're trying to get pregnant, even if you get your period back, sometimes you need to gain more weight, even just to get pregnant. So there could be problems that, stay for a lifetime. Osteopenia and osteoporosis are permanent issues. They don't change. They don't get better. So we really want the doctors and the coaches to be aware if your athlete is looking like they're moving in that direction, to stop and look at their activity, have them see a physician and get it diagnosed.
That's important what Beth just touched on, guys. She's saying that, these young athletes are under our control and they shouldn't know better. They're young, but a lot of the stuff that they can do now will affect their life down the road with the weight loss, the osteopenia. So it's something we need to address. So if one of your athletes has lost a significant amount of weight, what would you recommend the strength coach do? Send them to a doctor? What's the advice you would give them?
I think, again, we're trying to train the doctors in knowing this issue and also knowing when somebody needs to go to a therapist, a clinician for an eating disorder assessment. But I think the best advice I have for coaches is wherever you're coaching, connect with a team that knows this issue so you know where to send your athletes. Because if you send them to a doctor that doesn't know, what happens is the doctor will say, oh, it's fine. You're nothing bad is happening. Remember that our athletes are very, very driven. They want to play this sport and they're probably very scared and they may not be fully honest when they go to see their physician.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason I want to put on this summit and have experts like you on this is that we can start to build a platform where people can go and get information if they're not sure. So, So Beth, if anyone listening to the call right now has questions for you about, eating disorders, Meta, your private practice, where can they find you? And then let's give Meta's address. So where can they find you first?
They can find me. I'm at Meta. Here I am. And it's www.metainc.org and 617-558-1881. I think all of us can connect you. Any of us at Meta can connect any of the coaches or anybody. We could try to help you find a team actually anywhere in the country because we're connected nationally. So I really think that if you want to do due diligence to your athletes, make sure you have some good connections wherever you are in the country if you're listening to this. And we're happy to try to connect you wherever you are. So I think it's really important. And you'll get a better athlete out of this if you catch it early.
Nice. I try to tell people, and you've heard me say this, stay in your lane. Know what you're exactly at, know what you're great at. I know that I can coach people, but when it comes to eating disorders, nutrition, that is not my area of expertise. And I'm fortunate that I have you on a daily basis that I see in the gym and that I can seek out. So with this online summit, guys, everyone that's listening, we're trying to give you experts in every field as these female athletes go through more than just on the court stuff. They have a lot of stuff as they're growing up as teenagers and young ladies that they need to deal with. So Beth, with our conversation this morning, is there anything else you want to address, talk about before I let you go?
I think what's most important is that the eating disorder field is a little bit behind the times in research. But the one thing I know for sure is the quicker we get treatment for people that are either beginning to have an eating disorder or have disordered eating, the quicker they recover. We know that for sure. So please, please listen to this summit, listen to all the people, and then get these people help, and they will become, the possibility of them becoming the athlete they need to be is so great and so wonderful.
Excellent. So Beth just kicked off the summit. We have a nutritionist speaking, and we have a sports psychologist that will touch on this a little bit. So again, guys, there's going to be some great information. And Beth, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me.
Thanks, Jenny.